Hello and welcome. In this video, I'm going to show you how to create and configure the equivalent of a RAID 5 volume on a FreeNAS server, and then to make that volume shareable, and finally to connect to that RAID 5 volume from a Windows client. As always, let us begin by verifying that the necessary prerequisites are in place. The first prerequisite is to have FreeNAS installed on a computing device. Well, as this is one of many videos in my FreeNAS 11 beginner video tutorials, I've already installed FreeNAS onto a virtual machine, and I shall be using that virtual machine to demonstrate how to create a RAID 5 implementation. The second prerequisite is to ensure that we have enough hard drives, if you like, installed in our virtual FreeNAS computer such that we can create a RAID 5 volume. Recall, RAID 5 needs a minimum of 3 hard drives. So let us ensure that our FreeNAS virtual machine is selected, and then select Settings, and then select Storage. Now, if you notice, the icons to add an extra hard drive is not enabled, they're grayed out. That's because we already have 3 hard disks attached to our IDE controller. So to add more volumes, we need to add a SCSI controller. So you can see the icon, the tooltip has appeared, adds new storage controller at the bottom. I'm going to select that option and select SCSI controller. And there we go. And now I can attach new hard disks. So be sure to select the icon, the plus symbol over the square icon. The tooltip indicates add hard disk. That's exactly what we want to do. So I'm going to select that. Choose create new disk, choose the default option, the VDI virtual box disk image, and select next. Choose a dynamically allocated disk and select next. Again, all of these options have been explained in a previous video, so if you want to look up the meaning of those, I explained them in an earlier video. So let's choose an appropriate name, FreeNAS disk. In this case, disk 3, since I already have disk 1 and 2. And why don't we create them to be of size 10 gigabytes? So FreeNAS disk 3, 10 gigabytes. That's fine, and click Create. So let's create 3 more. Create new disk. VDI, yes. Next, dynamically allocated, next. And for the name, FreeNAS disk 4. And once again, 10 gigabytes in size. And let's create again our third disk. Create new disk, VDI image, dynamically allocated, FreeNAS disk 5, and again 10 gigabytes. Create, and once more create new disk, VDI, dynamically allocated, and 10 gigabytes. This time again FreeNAS disk 6. And you know what? Why don't we create 2 more disks, but this time a different size? The reason why I want to do this, it will enable me to show you more detailed information about the various options that we have when creating various volumes. So I'm going to select Create New Disk, VDI again, dynamically allocated. This time I'm going to call it FreeNAS disk 7, but I'm going to allocate 16 gig this time as opposed to 10 gig. So choose Create, and then 1 more disk, create new disk, VDI, dynamically allocated, FreeNAS disk 8, and 16 gig in size. So we've created 4 disks, disk 3 to 6 inclusive, that are of size 10 gigabytes, as we can see there, each of 10 gigabytes. And then lastly, disk 7 and disk 8 have 16 gigabytes each. OK. To activate those changes, simply select OK. We're ready to go now to boot up and run our FreeNAS operating system. So Once again, just ensure the FreeNAS virtual machine is selected and then press start, select start. So this will effectively power on our virtual machine. I'm going to select it and I'm going to select the option FreeNAS default, put into that. I'm going to choose normal boot up mode, press enter, excellent. So as you can see, notification messages appear here. You have auto capture the keyboard option turned on. I'm going to dismiss that. So by selecting the blue X, and the second message, the guest OS does not support mouse pointer integration. I'm going to dismiss that message again. I've explained each of those options in detail in a previous video as part of my video tutorial on FreeNAS. So if you want to know more about those, just look them up. So again, I'm going to leave this to record in real time, just so you get an idea of how long it takes. And see the way it's added the new disks. You can see the information here. The 10 gigabyte disks, and then the last two 16 gigabyte disks that I've added. So that's brilliant. It successfully has detected those hard drives. Now they're all virtual hard drives. Again, I'm using VirtualBox because it's a wonderful medium in which to demonstrate and provide educational value. Okay, so we're nearly there. The boot up process is now performing, detecting the various networking settings and so on. And shortly it will present me with the IP address of our web administrative console. You, in theory, should see the exact same as what I see on my screen. When I say exact same, obviously the IP addresses may be different on your virtual machine depending on the subnet in which you're operating in. Okay, so we're nearly there. And any moment now, it should present us with the IP address of our web administrative console. And there it is. Great. I'm now going to open up my browser and navigate to the IP address of the web administrative console and log in. So you enter in the password that you assigned when you initially installed FreeNAS for the first time. And there we go. I'm now logged in to the web administrative console of the FreeNAS server. The first recommended step is to view the disks that we have available to us. So select storage, then and select view disks. So these are the disks that we have. Okay, ADA1 and ADA2 are the disks that we created for a previous video tutorial when we created a stripe volume. And then we added now at the beginning of this video 4 disks, each of 10 gigabytes in size, and then we added 2 disks of 16 gigabytes in size. Now I know it shows 17 here because it shows, I suppose, the full amount. When I say the full amount, 16 gigabytes is the amount available, I suppose, in data, and this has shown us the raw amount available, which is 17.2 gig. Okay, that's fine. So these are the disks. The next step is to create the RAID 5 volume. So we'll do that now. Let's navigate to storage, and then volumes is already selected, and then select volume manager. So we now wish to create a RAID 5 implementation based volume. So the first thing, as always, let us choose a volume name, and for educational purposes I will enter in the name RAID 5 vol. Again, we could choose to extend an existing volume should an appropriate existing volume be present, but in our case there isn't. And we can also choose to encrypt this volume that we're creating. Fine, but we're not going to do that now. So let's focus on the heart of the matter. As you can see, the 2 16 gigabyte drives are listed here, and the 4 10 gigabyte drives that I added are listed here. So we're going to use the 4 10 gigabyte drives. To use those 4, simply select the plus symbol beside the indication to the option number 2, 10 gigabyte drive. Okay, so select plus, and as you can see, It adds in the option, and by default it chooses to use the mirror volume layout. That is not what we want. Okay, we want to select a RAID 5 implementation. So if we select the down arrow, notice actually to our surprise there is no RAID 5 option, and it's a little quirk in the user interface of FreeNAS. So to make, shall we say, the RAID 5 option appear, we need to change the configuration here. So we simply select the circular and we drag and drop it such that it uses 4 slots serially as opposed to 2 slots with 2 drives sitting on top of each other. And now, as you can see, the option RAID Z2 appears, which did not appear before. So we have 2 new options, RAID Z and RAID Z2. They did not appear before. Okay, so RAID Z is effectively a RAID 5 implementation on the ZFS file system. And then RAID Z2 is in fact a RAID 6 implementation on the ZFS file system. So recall, RAID 5 uses a distributed parity disk. So in effect, although we have 4 disks present here, only 3 disks will be used to store data, and 1 disk will be used for redundancy. Now, I said 1 disk. Actually, one of the disks overall will be used for redundancy, but RAID 5 actually uses distributed redundancy. So the redundancy will be spread throughout the 4 disks. But still, only 3 disks effectively, or the equivalent of 3 disks, that's a better way of saying it, will be used for data, and the equivalent of 1 disk will be used for redundancy. Okay, so as you can see, there's 4 by 10 gigabyte drives. In reality, sorry, that's RAID 2, I want to use RAID Z. There's 4 by 10 gigabyte drives. In reality, each drive can only hold 8 gigabytes of actual data. So I said only 3 of the 4 will be used to store actual data, and that's why 3 by 8 gives you a capacity of 24 gigabytes that you can see here, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead now and select Add Volume. So that's going to take a few moments as it creates the volume. And this will effectively create the equivalent of a RAID 5 implementation type volume on our FreeNAS server. So it's taking a few moments to complete. Again, I want to leave it recording in real time so that you get some idea of how long it takes. And there we go, volume successfully added. So we have our striped volume from our previous video, which I did not remove, and now we have a RAID 5 volume. And again, the RAID 5 volume uses LZ4, which is very, very fast compression. Very good. Perhaps it is no harm to do a quick recap on what a dataset is. So just to recall, this is our RAID 5 volume, what I've selected here. And within our volume, we can have 1 or more datasets. A good way to think about that is if RAID 5 was a hard disk in the old style hard disks, for example, you could have a hard disk of 200 gigabytes. And within that hard disk, you could partition that hard disk into a C drive and a D drive. So conceptually, a data set is like a C drive or a D drive. Basically, it's like a partition within a volume. It's a nice, simple conceptual way to think of it, and it's a valid way of thinking about it. No harm pointing out also, we can select a particular data set within the volume, and let's have a look at some advanced configuration options. So we have the edit option dialog box. I'm now going to select the advanced mode, okay, and we can actually set quotas. So a quota for this data set, by default 0 is an unlimited, so it'll use whatever, it'll use up to the size of the actual volume in which it resides, or we can actually put a quota on it. And this is particularly useful if you create 2 or more data sets within a given volume. So if you had a volume that was, for example, 10 gigabytes in size, and you wanted to create 2 data sets within that, you could create one data set that would be of 5 gigabytes in size and the other data set to be of 5 gigabytes in size, and so on. And as this option here indicates, you can actually have data sets within data sets. And as also you can reserve a space for a data set. So there's various different options, just to be aware of that. That's all I wish to talk about there. Recall that we have two disks that are currently not being used. So once again, select Storage and View Disks. So we are not using at the moment D4 and D5, the two 16 gigabyte disks. So say for example, I'm going to select Storage again and Volume Manager. So I beg your pardon, I just meant to select Storage and Volumes. So let's have a look. Our RAID 5 volume. Imagine one of those disks within our RAID 5 volume became corrupt and we needed to replace it. How do we do it? Well, you could simply select the RAID 5 volume and not the dataset, which is below it. That's the dataset, this is the volume, and then choose Volume Status. And then imagine any one of these disks were corrupt, the status would change to indicate that the disk has a problem. We could then select any one of the disks, so I'll select it there, and then choose Replace. And notice it now gives us an option from the two 17 gigabyte disks that we have. So I'm just going to do that right now. Select disk 4 and click Replace. Well, actually I won't, because in reality this would take quite some time. So maybe it's best I don't, because it would slow down the video. But you see the process. That's how it's possible. In order to share our RAID 5 volume, we need to ensure that a few housekeeping tasks have been performed. The first step is to ensure that the permissions are set up correctly. So once again, let us select Storage, and this time we want to select the RAID 5 volume dataset. So we select that and then we choose Change Permissions. And most of the settings are fine. The owner is root, that's fine. The group is wheel, that's fine. So we're going to leave the permission types as Unix, and we're going to enable full access so that the owner, group, and others have full read, write, and execute access. From a Windows perspective, this means when the guest connects to this volume, they'll be able to read and write to the volume. And yes, let us set permissions recursively. Okay, let us apply that change by selecting Change. Very good. Mount point permissions successfully updated. Okay. The next step is to create a shared folder from our RAID 5 volume. So to do that, let us select Sharing, and we want to create a Windows share, so let us select Windows SMB, and then select Add Windows Share. So the first step is to choose a path, so let us select Browse, and then we navigate to the folder that we want to share, and in this case it's the RAID 5 volume. So we double click it to ensure that it's filled in here, and then scroll down. Again, purely for demonstration purposes, I'm going to choose a name, RAID 5 Share. In fact, I'll just call it RAID Share to keep it simple. RAID Share. Yes, apply default permissions recursively, and yes, allow guest access. And no password is required to connect to the share. That's fine. Again, purely for demonstration purposes. In the real world, in a production environment, you would most definitely require a username and a password. Okay, we'll just select OK here now. And that takes a few moments, and Windows SMB share successfully updated. That's great. Let us verify that the Windows SMB service is properly configured and is indeed running. So on the left-hand side, let us select Services, scroll down, and we shall select the SMB option, and we shall quickly examine the settings. And everything looks good so far. Guest account nobody, that's fine. File mask, we'll use the default settings, which is 0666, that's totally fine. And directory mask is by default 0777, that's totally fine. Basically 0777 allows you to create a directory with execute access, so to speak, whereas 0666 is with read and write access, but not execute access for creating a file. Okay, so far it all looks good. Let's scroll down. Looks good. And that's it. I'm happy with those settings, so we're going to select Cancel. And now we simply want to verify that the services are in fact running, that these SMB service, should I say, is actually running. So let us scroll down, And yes, it is currently running. Okay, that's fine. The final step is to connect to a RAID 5 shared volume from a Windows client PC using Windows Explorer. So I'll do that now. So simply open up Windows Explorer, select this PC, then from the menu bar select Computer, then select Add a Network Location. We're now presented with an Add Network Location wizard. So select Next. Where do you want to create this network location? We're only given one option, so let us select that and choose Next. Then I recommend you click on View Examples to get an idea of how you would enter in your shared folder details. So we're going to use typically the first option here, which has /server and then slash the directory name. So // and then the IP address of our FreeNAS server, which is 192.168.0.1, and then the name of our share, which in this case is RAID share, and click Next. I may have misspelled that, so let me go back and verify what is the name of the shared folder. It's called RAID share. That is correct. So let me go there again and try that once more. Computer, add a network location. Go through the wizard and 192.168.0.6 / RAID share, and this time it worked. Very good. What do you want to name this location? Again, I'm going to use the default. I'm going to accept the default options and choose Next, and then complete the network wizard. Click Finish, and it opens up Windows Explorer at the appropriate share. And once more, just to prove that we can create new folders and have write access, I'm going to go New Folder and type Test Folder and press Enter, and as you can see, the folder was successfully created. And just to prove that that was created on FreeNAS, I'm going to go back to FreeNAS. I'm going to scroll down here and select Shell, and it's going to open up a dynamic shell within our browser. So this effectively saves us from having to SSH into the FreeNAS operating system. And I'm going to navigate to where the FreeNAS volume is created. And by default, all volumes in Linux are mounted in a folder called /mount. So let's have a look at the contents of /mount. And there is RAID 5 vol. So I'm going to say cd RAID 5, if I type it correctly. And then let's have a look at the contents. And there you go. There is a test folder I just created. So that's it. That's all I wanted to show you. Thank you very much for watching this video.